thank you to the organizers for inviting me to give opening remarks at the EU Integration Forum. Since 2022, the world has changed dramatically. Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine has fundamentally changed the security situation on the continent and continues to represent one of the greatest geopolitical challenges facing the world. It has been a stark reminder of the frailty of peace and the need to uphold an international system based on common values and legal norms. In this context, it is clear that the EU is looking at the European continent in a different light. Enlargement policies are no exception to this shift, and while it has always been a priority, now more than ever, the EU is emphasizing the common European future of accession candidates and the EU 27. It is an investment in long-term peace, stability and security. This has also led to increased momentum for enlargement decision, and numerous milestones were achieved since last year. First, in June 2022, Ukraine and Moldova were granted candidate status, and Georgia received potential candidate status. The EU opened accession negotiations with Albania and North Macedonia in July later that year, and immediately thereafter the Commission started the screening process, and in December Bosnia and Herzegovina was also granted candidate status, and Kosovo applied for EU membership. Regional cooperation under the Berlin process is also gaining momentum, as seen in the Berlin process summit in Tirana this month. Following the three mobility agreements signed last year, the participants welcomed the signing of the agreement on mutual recognition of professional qualifications for nurses, veterinary surgeons, pharmacists and midwives that will advance the mobility of professionals in the Western Balkans. The full ratification of all these agreements now is a priority. Our partners need to embrace this momentum and advance on the key EU reforms. The 2023 enlargement package and country reports, to be published next week, are going to assess the progress achieved and offer guidance on the way forward. The presence of European Commission President von der Leyen this week in the region is yet another clear testimony of the urgency of our commitment to the European integration of the Western Balkan countries. Allow me to remind you that the candidate status was granted to Bosnia and Herzegovina on the understanding that steps are taken to strengthen the rule of law, to take steps to fight against corruption and organized crime, migration management, and fundamental rights. The adoption of the integrity amendments to the Law on High Judicial and Prosecutorial Council, HJPC, Law on Ombudsman, Law on Foreigners, Law on Freedom of Access to Information, Law on Wine, are all steps in the right direction. But the authorities need to step up their efforts and quickly further progress on the 14 key priorities identified in the 2019 Commission's opinion. The law on courts, the law on conflict of interest, in particular, are urgently needed reforms which could significantly improve the rule of law in the country. We often hear criticism claiming that the EU is lowering its standards in welcoming legislation that is not fully aligned with EU acquis. Let us be reminded that none of the countries who received candidate status or even which opened accession negotiations had perfect legislation in place in several key areas. Improving and aligning legislation is a long and transformative process for any country aiming to join the EU, and there are no easy shortcuts. One example at hand, the newly adopted amendments to the law on the HJPC. It constitutes an improvement over the previous version and includes several important novelties, including a system of verification of asset declaration of judicial office holders, which is key to strengthen integrity and accountability of the judiciary. All institutions in Bosnia and Herzegovina need to cooperate constructively and in good faith with the HJPC to fully implement the law and ensure the effectiveness of the integrity checks. The EU will see to it that the law is effectively implemented and that a comprehensive law, which should be fully aligned with EU standards, is drafted in parallel. The EU is, however, seriously concerned over the legislative steps as well as initiatives and announcements in the Republika Srpska that run counter to the EU path of Bosnia and Herzegovina, including secessionist rhetoric, putting into question the constitutional order of the country, and the restrictive legislation adopted or in phase of adoption targeting CSOs and media. In particular, the recriminalization of defamation in Republika Srpska is regrettable and undeniably a major step backwards in the protection of fundamental rights, and the draft law on foreign agents is a clear threat to civil society in the entity. Any action against the territorial integrity and sovereignty of Bosnia-Herzegovina, including the attacks on the constitutional order that we have seen, coupled with serious backsliding on human rights, will lead to negative consequences. Respect for human rights, freedom of expression, media freedom and pluralism, as well as freedom of operation of civil society organizations, are key pillars of a democratic society, and even more so for any potential member of the European Union. The EU also welcomes Bosnia-Herzegovina's significant improvement in aligning with the EU's CFSP, the Common Foreign Security Policy, signaling its commitment to the EU path. This alignment by Bosnia-Herzegovina needs to be further improved in view of ensuring full implementation of the restrictive measures, including those adopted following the Russian aggression against Ukraine. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude with a few remarks as we look ahead to the coming months. The 2023 country report that will be published next week will take stock of progress achieved following the granting of the candidate status. The EU path is open, but the country has to deliver on the EC opinion's 14 key priorities. There is no time to waste. The moment is now, and now is the time to show true commitment. Bosnia and Herzegovina citizens deserve and demand no less, but unfortunately expect and hope for far less. I hope they will be proven wrong. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to be here today to represent the Swedish Embassy and to welcome all of you to this EU Integration Forum. The purpose of today's forum is to promote a debate on the issues and challenges of the accession process in the Western Balkan countries, with a special focus on Bosnia and Herzegovina. The main topic is the rule of law, which is the key preconditions for the key precondition for democracy, but also for further steps in the EU integration process. We have knowledgeable participants in our panel today, experts in the rule of law, representatives of government institutions, civil society, academia, and media, which bodes for a very interesting day. Sweden is proud to support BiH's EU membership aspirations. The overarching goal of Swedish development cooperation in this region is EU accession for the Bosnia-Herzegovina, but also for the rest of the Western Balkan countries. We are here to help and to support, but of course, the entire job must be done by the country itself. Bosnia-Herzegovina has taken steps in the field of rule of law, but more needs to be done, like finalizing the adoption of several laws from the 14 priorities of the European Commission. Today's conference will be an important stock-taking exercise organized by our long-term partner, Transparency International. I am grateful for providing us with an opportunity to discuss these issues in an open and participatory format. Where do we stand today? What needs and what can be done, and by whom? And what can we do as donors and also as member states of the European Union? Important questions to discuss. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions here today. Thank you very much.
Uvažene dame i gospodo, poštovani predstavnici institucija, medija i civilnog društva, dozvolite da vam se zahvalim u ime Transparency International na odzivu na današnji EU Integracijski Forum. Kao što smo zapravo svi svjedoci, EU Integracijski Forum današnji se održava u svjetlu povećanog interesovanja za proces integracija koje je slijedilo kao rezultat ruske agresije na Ukrajinu, ali isto tako svjedoci smo i turneje gospođe Ursule von der Leyen po regionu i najava značajnih izdvajanja sredstava za Zapadni Balkan. Također u iščekivanju smo svi izvještaja, koji više se ne zove izvještaja napretku, samo izvještaja Evropske komisije o zemljama u regiji. Dakle, stoga naš fokus ili naša intencija da ovaj forum pokuša adresirati ključno pitanje za zemlje Zapadnog Balkana, kako zapravo povećani interes i kako debatu koja se vodi i unutar Evropske unije, ali i u regionu o ubrzanju procesa proširenja ili integracija zemalja Zapadnog Balkana u Evropsku uniju, kako je zapravo operacionalizovati u čitav niz konkretnih koraka u zemljama Zapadnog Balkana. Istovremeno svjedoci smo da zemlje Zapadnog Balkana već duži vremenski period ne pokazuju znakove ozbiljnih pomaka u reformskim procesima. Svjedoci smo da na pojedinim žarišnim tačkama, Bosna i Hercegovina je svakako jedna od njih, postoji vrlo kredibilna prijetnja od dalje eskalacije. Duži vremenski period proces evropskih integracija se činio gotovo kao klinički mrtav. Vrlo izražen demokratski deficit koji zemlje Zapadnog Balkana svrstava u red hibridnih režima, sve prisutnost fenomena zarobljene države i institucija, odnosno sistemske korupcije, odsustvo na polju jačanja vladavine prava, predominantne su karakteristike i dalje u regiji. Ništa manji izazov nisu ni ekonomska i razvojna konvergencija. Podsjetit ću vas da prosjek GDP-a per capita u zemljama Zapadnog Balkana dostiže tek nešto manje od 40% prosjeka u zemljama Evropske unije. Također ilustrativan je podatak o deficitu zemalja Zapadnog Balkana prema Evropskoj uniji koji iznosi u posljednje 3 godine 28 milijardi konvertibilnih eura. Istovremeno, cijeli region se suočava sa ogromnim stepenom depopulacije. U samom smo vrhu globalnih lista koje mjere takve trendove. Nažalost, svakodnevno se potvrđuju riječi poznatog naučnika, gospodina Krasteva, koji je rekao da je sada očevidno i na Balkanu, a i šire, lakše promijeniti državu nego vladu. Činjenica da 2 decenije nakon održavanja samita Evropske unije i zemalja Zapadnog Balkana u Solunu, samo Hrvatska primljena u Evropsku uniju, je ilustrativan primjer i podsjetnik da zapravo deklarativna opredjeljenja trebamo operacionalizovati u čitav niz konkretnih koraka, za što nam je sasvim sigurno potrebna politička volja. Bosna i Hercegovina je i dalje jedna od najopasnijih žarišnih tačaka regiona. Kontinuirana politička kriza koja se dešava u zemlji ne samo da je onemogućila napredak na ispunjavanju prioriteta iz mišljenja Evropske komisije, već je uticala i na pogoršanje stanja, prije svega, rekao bih, u oblasti ljudskih prava, ali i korupcije. Postojeća disfunkcionalna struktura upravljanja u Bosni i Hercegovini jako teško će moći da odgovori na izazove pregovora. Tako da i ukoliko Bosna i Hercegovina dobije početak pregovora, potrebne su važni i snažni unutrašnji iskoraci na uspostavljanju funkcionalnog modela koji će moći odgovoriti na te izazove. Otuda i ključni fokus intencija današnjeg integracijskog foruma jeste kako podstaći i artikulisati reforme unutar zemalja aspirantkinja za članstvo u Evropskoj uniji na Zapadnom Balkanu i tu svakako nedvojbeno su ključni prioriteti demokratizacija i vladavina prava, stvaranje, dakle, autentične tražnje za reformama. Dozvolite mi nadu da izrazim nadu da će ovaj integracijski forum dati snažan doprinos u tom smislu u svjetlu otvaranja debate kako intenzivirati napore na ubrzanju procesa. Još jednom se svima zahvaljujem u ime Transparency International.